Hey everyone, welcome to a special edition of Family Life Blended. I'm Ron Deal. This is our first You Ask, We Answer episode. But hey, it won't be our last. In the future, we plan to drop bonus episodes that are responses to your questions, which, if you haven't heard, you can now submit to us in writing. Just email us, blendedquestions@familylife.com, or you can call and leave a voice message with your question. We might even play your message on a future episode of You Ask, We Answer. So send us your questions today. The show notes will remind you of all the details. Family Life Blended is a donor-supported podcast that helps blended families and those who love them pursue the relationships that matter most. If you haven't subscribed, man, I sure hope that you will do that and do that today. Now, before we jump in, let me just remind you that Blended and Blessed, our annual live stream event for blended family couples, it's coming up real soon, Saturday, April 2nd, 2022. I'd love for you to put it on your personal family calendar. Just know that it's there and make plans to be a part of it. And for those of you who want your church to be able to host it for the community, it's time to get it on your church calendar. Start having those conversations with your church leadership team. They need to plan for this. So whether you're going to attend the live event in Houston, whether you're going to stream it at home, or you're going to host it for couples in your church and community, visit blendedandblessed.com this week to learn all about it. That's blendedandblessed.com, and get it on your calendar. I know you know the name Gayla Grace. She is no stranger to this podcast. She is part of the Family Life Blended team. She works with me here in our ministry. She's a speaker and author. She joined me in the studio to begin tackling your questions. And man, did your questions cover a lot of topics. Everything from being a step-parent with a narcissistic biological parent in the other home, to parenting standards, to finding your place as a step-parent, being a childless stepmom, to dealing with the fallout of affairs, and adding a new baby to a stepfamily, all kinds of really great questions. And by the way, that last one, adding a new baby to the family, that's where we pick up this conversation. Our first edition of You Ask, We Answer. Gayla, thanks for being with me.
Good to be here.
So we've got some questions that people have submitted. I love it when people do this.
Oh, yeah, it's helpful.
I like doing Q&A stuff. Do you like doing this?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, because this is where you live, in the question, right?
Right.
That's where we live.
Right.
Okay, so let's jump in. First one says, our kids are 8, 5, and 3. They go to their dad's on weekends. My husband and I just had a baby. So this is a stepmom, yours, her husband's 3 kids, and
Right.
now they have an ours baby. She's 4 weeks old, she says. Yesterday, the oldest 2, so that would be her stepchildren, asked, when does the baby go to their dads on the weekends also? Her question, how do I explain the difference in dads in a way that still makes us one family?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you just have to be honest that there are 2 dads in the picture and accept the differences that come up as a stepfamily.
Yeah.
So my husband and I went through this when we had our child, the child we had together, and there were questions about the differences. And we were just honest. Our kids were old enough, and these are 2, the 2 at 8 and 5 are old enough to really talk about and be honest with them.
Right. Right. Okay. Do you mind if I ask you a question?
Sure.
What's the fear? When one of the other children says, well, why don't they go to the other house with us? Or they bring up something that obviously they've made an observation, something's not the same here. What's the fear in a parent or step-parent's heart?
I think some of the fear is just that you're different. You're not a biological family. And this paints that picture.
Yeah. As if that means we're less than?
Yes, right.
And you don't want kids to think they're less than because
Right.
this one has 2 daddies and this one doesn't have 2 daddies or whatever the backstory is, that somehow that means their worth or their value is different. The reason I bring this out is because I hear that fear embedded
Right.
in the question. She says, how do I answer this in a way that still makes us one family? Okay, first of all, let's just face reality. You're not one family.
Right.
It is complex. There are many people involved, many parents involved in the lives of these children. And so, maybe there's a part of you that's still living in that fantasy, and you need to deal with that.
Right.
Like, honestly, you just need to wrestle with that. The other part of you is the fear that somehow kids will feel something you don't want them to feel. Now, that I get. And here's the thing that I think is true, especially with children of this age. The bigger deal you make it, the bigger deal it becomes. If you're anxious as you're explaining where babies come from, if you are all sweating and just stumbling over your words, then your kids get the impression this is a horrible thing. I don't even know what you're about to tell me, but whatever it is, it's freaking out my mom. So, no, be matter of fact, be plain, be direct. It's okay. If somebody, if you adopted a child and they don't know they're adopted and they're 26, you got a problem. Like, I would get real much, much sooner in a child's life and be matter of fact than put off what feels like a lie to them until a day where they wake up to it.
Yeah, because it is going to come out, especially as families gather. And so then there's two dads at an elementary program. I mean, it's going to be inevitable that there has to be explanation about this.
Okay, so here's the thing. Here's my quick little suggestion to this person. Modify this little script however you want, but be matter of fact, be direct, nonchalant, as if it's not a big deal, and it probably won't be a big deal.
Right.
So here's my tip. Use something the child already understands. Can you imagine looking at this 8-year-old and saying, hey, you know how I have a dad, your Grandpa Jones, and your dad has a dad, right? And your stepdad has a dad. We all have different dads. That's true about a lot of us. And they're all your grandparents. They're all related to you, but they're different people. Well, you have a different dad than this child over here. So I was married before to your dad. That's why you guys go on the weekends. And now I'm married to this person, and we had this child together. And so that's why little baby over here doesn't go on the weekends, because this is his dad.
Right.
Matter of fact,
pretty
direct. Maybe there's some questions that come. Oh, well, then why were you married? And then there's follow-up, and there's different story there that you can get into. And sometimes that's what people are afraid of. I don't want to get into the whole divorce and why it happened. And you could decide how much detail you give.
Exactly.
But again, talking about the realities of a child's life in matter-of-fact terms often takes the sting out of it. Plus, you're doing the child the honor of stepping into reality for them and giving them some guidance about their world and their life.
Yeah, there's probably more questions underneath that that will then come out and probably need to come out.
Yep. Okay, good question. Let's do another one.
Okay. 7 years ago, my husband and I had an affair. He was married. I was a college student who started off as his friend. A year later, he divorced his wife, and we've been together since. I'm sharing this because I need advice on how to deal with the hatred from our son's biological mom. I understand why she's angry. She is also a daughter of Christ. I know I can't put a timestamp on her forgiveness. So how do I deal with her not wanting me to be involved at all?
Yeah, the stepmom.
Right.
And of course, you can imagine the biological mother's hurt and anger.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right.
You destroyed my marriage, my family.
Right.
And she's hurt. She's angry. I think it's very insightful that this stepmother is recognizing I can't put a timestamp on her forgiveness. That's true. You cannot.
Right.
That's not up to you to decide.
Right.
I think the path here is just a constant humility about what has happened and about the choices that you made. And it may feel like a sort of a constant confession about, I get it, I understand, this is difficult. And even perhaps talking to children about that reality at some point. I think we got another question about affair. We'll get into kids a little bit more here in just a second. But I just think that owning it, how do I deal with her not wanting me to be involved? I think you can, as a forgiven child of God, we all stand at the foot of the cross in gratitude and thankfulness, and none of our sins are ever okay, but Jesus has washed them clean. And so with that, you have an identity that allows you to stand with honor as the stepmom in the kids' lives, and you belong at the soccer game, you belong there, and yet you're going to be very gentle as it relates to this biological mother and her posture towards you. But you belong there.
Right.
So you stand firm in that identity and you're okay with it. You don't flaunt that. You don't push that onto the biological mother or the children. No, that would not be the appropriate, humble heart. But it's okay that you're there.
Yeah, and I think, too, you pray for that biological mom's heart, and
Yeah.
You just never know in time, as she can see that the stepmom is gently making good gestures in the lives of her kids. It could change her heart, but I think you pray for her heart.
Yeah.
You know, Ron, I also hear some guilt in what she's saying.
Yeah.
And I think it is a good reminder for us to say God's grace covers our sin.
Yeah.
But there are consequences, and that's what she's dealing with.
Yeah.
And I think then that you just allow God to work in those lives and know that time might change some of this.
Yes. I think the key thing that the biological mother would need to see from you is just a constant repentant heart.
Right. I agree.
And not running from it or hiding from the consequences. Just having that posture about you over and over and over again over time maybe will help the biological mother move towards her forgiveness. That's totally on her. Her journey toward forgiveness and letting go, and that's totally on her. You can't make her do that.
Right.
But you can just have the right posture and pray and hope.
You know, and there's another podcast that you did with Sandy Patty, podcast number 27, titled Beyond Broken. And Sandy Patty is very open about their affair and how that impacted their marriage and their kids. And I think that'd be a great one for this person to listen to.
We did have a second question dealing with affairs. So listen to this. Sir, they're talking to me specifically. I heard you on a local radio station today stating how wrong it is for parents to keep kids away from the other parent. In my situation, I had affairs several years ago, and after my husband turned physically abusive, we divorced. So there was a lot of distress going on, a lot of poor choices there. Now, with our 15-year-old daughter living with him, her former husband, he has divulged all the details of my affairs that he learned about when we were previously in counseling. She knows things about my indiscretions that no child should ever know about their parent. I'm concerned that my ex-husband will do the same with our 12-year-old son, causing him much of the same heartache that my daughter has admitted to enduring as a result. I feel like I have the duty to protect what innocence my son has left. That's really important, Gayla. We'll come back to that. I could care less about my ex or my reputation. My past is my past, period. But kids don't handle things so well. Am I wrong to severely limit the boy's time with his dad? Okay, I remember this question, reading this, thinking right up until that last part, yeah, this is hard. And it sounds like your ex is using your indiscretions in the past sort of as a weapon against you. And there's something there that's difficult. But then she turns the corner and says, so because of that, can I, limit my son's time with his dad? Okay, here's the deal. Your ex-husband has taken control of your reputation by telling stories about you, and you want to take control back by holding your son hostage. Guess what? That's, repaying evil with evil. That's fighting fire with fire. And all that will do is exacerbate the negativity between you and your former husband, and things will get much worse for you and for the kids. This is not the posture. It is not the way to go. You don't fight control with control.
Right.
I want to suggest that this woman get ahead of this herself. Start talking to her daughter and her son about her past. That takes the power away from your husband. He doesn't get to control you or the narrative about you and use that as a manipulative tool. B, it's really you being humble about your past. It's you explaining, I've learned hard lessons and I am deeply sorry. And I am so sorry to you that you have to now know this about me. I am committed to not repeating these sins in our current situation. Whatever that story is, you get out in front. You own it. That's the only thing that's going to change this dynamic. That's the only thing that's going to protect your relationship with your son and your daughter right now you're vulnerable to how your ex-husband uses that information.
Right.
Don't let him do that.
Right. And also, if she opens up, then it kind of gives permission for those kids to ask questions.
Yeah,
Whereas the way
good.
it's happened now, that daughter may not feel like she can broach the subject. It's just awkward. But if she's the one that's opening up, then it just gives more room for dialogue.
Yeah. This is a much better path. Don't fight fire with fire.
Right.
Control with control. Guess what? In your marriage, there was a control issues going on back then.
Right.
Here we are in divorce, still having control issues.
And this 12-year-old is going to reach a point where he's driving. He can go make his own decisions about seeing dad, and it could come out anyway, regardless of how she tries to control it at this point.
Exactly. So there's just no way of controlling the narrative other than for you to be repentant about it, humble about it,
Right.
confessatorial about it,
Right.
and be proactive with that. And I think it'll change the dynamic.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, let's move to the next one. I'm in a newlywed with a blended marriage. This has a lot of common themes, Ron, that I hear. While my husband and I were both previously married, he has 2 teenagers from his first marriage, but I don't have children. I always wanted them and grieve not being a mother. I'm definitely still trying to learn what my role is as a step-parent. I mostly feel left out when I'm with my husband and his kids. The 3 of them will walk 3 across when we go to church, the store, etc. I feel like I'm left trailing in the background. They want to sit on either side of him. I'm never quite sure where to sit. And unlike many of the people that you interview on your podcast, I'm the only new person in this family. I recognize the kids have their own struggles with the marriage, but I feel so very unsure of when to give them space and when to try to build relationships. Any advice for the childless step-parent? On top of that, at times, the stories of my stepchildren as babies and toddlers, etc., are so hard to hear. Their mother got to have those moments with my husband, but I won't have that chance. How do I navigate my own grief when people now try to pretend that I'm no longer childless because my husband has kids? There's a lot in there. I think we can just kind of tackle them maybe one at a time. The grief is a big piece.
Yeah.
And I think she needs to open up to her husband. I'm not sure how much dialogue is going on between her and her spouse about her feelings, because he can make a difference.
Yes.
He's the one.
How would he make a difference?
By addressing it with his kids.
Yeah.
And even, let's say, in church, it's okay for him to say, I want to sit by my wife.
Yes.
And we can take turns with who sits on the other side of me, but I'm going to sit by my wife. That validates she's important to him. That also tells the kids that she's important to him.
Yeah, and there's some fine tuning in what you just said. I want to make sure our listener caught it. So we can take turns. In a new blended family, that's really helpful. We talk about moving toward your children even as you move toward your new spouse. So letting the kids on occasion sit on either side of him like they always have is a sacrifice by this stepmother, but she's doing herself the favor of them having dad the way they always have. But then she's going to rely and trust that her husband is going to say to the kids every other time or every 2 or 3, whatever it is, all right, you guys sit on my right, she's sitting on my left. And he takes responsibility for restructuring how they sit. This may feel like a very small thing, how they sit in church. No, it's not a small thing, right? It's a big thing to elevate the step-parent status in the eyes of the children and in the heart of the biological parent. So again, yes, you're right. She's got to talk to her husband. Together they can decide how we're going to orchestrate these little moments. It's not going to be all or nothing, one way or the highway. No, it's a little bit of both.
Right.
Kids on either side, then the spouse on the in a place of priority. So that's going to be one little element to this. You said something about loss. I'd love for you to say a little more about this. There's a lot of grief in this.
There is.
If you're a childless stepmom, talk about the grief in that.
Honestly, she might need to get some outside help to deal with her grief, because her husband isn't going to understand that.
Yeah.
And especially for women, I do think God gives us a natural maternal sense. And this hasn't worked out for her.
Yeah.
And so I think it might be helpful for her to get some counseling to help her deal with that grief.
Yeah, and we know other stepmoms find other childless stepmoms and
Right.
they have lunch. You know, I mean,
Right.
something
Can
like
be
that
so helpful.
can be really helpful to just help you know, you're not alone, and
Yeah.
this is a struggle. And the piece there at the end where she talked about how other people now view her as no longer childless.
Right.
Well, yeah, that's because they don't quite understand that there's a real difference between having your own biological children
A
and
real
stepchildren.
difference.
You love stepchildren; they're a big part of your heart and life, of course, but it doesn't fulfill that great need.
No, it doesn't.
So again, having somebody that is safe for you to talk through these issues with and say it out loud and then not have them look at you like you got a third eye in the middle of your forehead.
Right. And be very open and honest about the fact that you'll never feel the same about these stepchildren as you would if they were your biological children.
Right.
It's okay to say that out loud because it's reality.
Find your safe people. You know, Gayla, in my wife and I, in our journey of losing a child, we now work with and volunteer with a ministry that ministers to parents who have lost children. And we find ourselves saying over and over and over, this is a hard thing, but it's your job to choose the people you share your grief with.
Yeah.
It is your job to choose carefully. And when you discover, oh, okay, this person is not one of my safe people, then don't, this is the way my wife says it, don't go to the hardware store expecting to buy bread.
That's good.
You're not going to find any bread there. They don't have that there. Yeah, but they should have bread there. They should. I'm going to go back to that store and I'm going to insist. But, you know, some people just don't have it to give you. They're not going to feed you anything of sustenance. They're just going to give you nails and hammers. And no. So find those people that are safe and then talk with them. Be open with them. That's who you disclose and really wrestle with things with. Find your safe people.
Right, exactly.
What's another little element to this? I'm unsure when to give them space and when to try to build relationships. Oh, that she's feeling the outsider thing.
Yes.
And we all know that's a big deal for step parents. Yes, you're an outsider. I mean, let's say it. You're on the outside looking in, trying to figure out how to get those people. I said that right. How to get those people to let you into their heart. It's so frustrating and difficult and challenging.
You can't force that, though. That's the reality.
Yep.
So again, we come back to what can we do? And I know when I felt like an outsider as a stepmom, there were times that I had to go to other circles where I felt like an insider. So it was reality that I felt like an outsider in my home. But I was still an insider in other places, in my work, in my running community, in my church. And so if you get filled up where you're an insider, then you can come back and you can deal with this outsider. It doesn't last forever, Ron. I mean, I feel like as you hear stories, you hear of past vacations you weren't a part of, you see baby pictures, eventually it just kind of becomes second nature that, oh, this is a past that they had that I'm not part of. And it gets to where it's okay. But in the beginning, there's some harshness to those feelings.
And we've wrapped all the way around to the marriage because the one insider who's really invested in bringing you in is your spouse. Hopefully, they're the ones who are looking for opportunities to have you sit beside them on the row at church and to ways of walking in, sitting in the front seat of the car when you're sitting on couch watching TV and holding hands. That sends that message of, hey, I'm bringing you in. And other people, other children noticing this, hey, we're bringing someone in to our inner circle. That's a biological parent's job and opportunity. And so work with them, talk with them. Don't badger them. That just makes it harder for them to be motivated to bring you in. Work with them. Be a team. Help each other out with this.
But just make sure they know. So I'm working with a step couple right now who the stepmom expressed this. And she said sometimes he does a really good job and then other days he just falls off the bandwagon. And we talked about maybe there's a signal that you give him when you are really feeling this outsider and you need him to plug in to something that would help you feel better.
And it's not a frying pan to the back of the head?
No.
Okay,
it's
good.
not that.
Okay,
No.
we got that. Some other signal. Let's do another question. Ron, do you do virtual therapy or marriage intensives? My wife and I are not doing well. It's true. I used to do an awful lot of that. I did marriage therapy intensives for couples and blended families. We'd spend 3 days together and really, really dig hard and try to repair some things in their relationship. Used to do virtual coaching and counseling. All of that has become overwhelming for me. And so over the recent past, I have developed another strategy that I'm very excited to tell our listeners about. We've started training therapists and counselors who are licensed professionals. Some of them are relationship coaches. And we've created a network where people can go online and find somebody in their area or find somebody who does virtual work who's not in your area.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And so go to smartstepfamilies.com. That's my personal webpage, but it connects you to everything I've got my fingers in, smartstepfamilies.com, and just go to the top menu and you'll find a counselor page. And you can go there and look by state. We've actually got somebody in South Africa, too, who's been trained. Wow. Training is ongoing. Mm-hmm. If you're a therapist or you know a therapist who wants to get more of this training, I will be doing virtual training, 2-day, 12-hour training on an ongoing basis. So people can look for that on that same website.
Yeah, and I just want to add how important it is that we find counselors who are trained in step families. Yeah. It is a different dynamic, and you want to make sure that your counselor is giving you good advice.
And I'm glad you said that, because I just have to say this. Most therapists, even marriage and family therapists, that you would assume they've had some training as it relates to the differing dynamics of single-parent homes and blended family homes. They just haven't.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
It's often overlooked and missed. And so unless they spend some time, some focused time, really trying to understand, you're right, they can end up doing more damage than good. Mm-hmm. So pick somebody. That's why we're trying to develop this network. Recognized smart step family therapy providers who have done their homework.
Right, exactly. Okay, let's go to another question. I've heard you say that biological parents often lower the standards for their kids during the single-parent years. What if the step-parent thinks that higher standards are necessary? Any advice on how to navigate the catch-22 situation that the biological parent is the one who lowered the standards to dangerous levels?
Man, and this is a catch-22. If you're not familiar with that phrase, rock in a hard place is another way to say it, where if you step in and try to do something as a step-parent, it works against you. If you say nothing, it absolutely works against you. It feels like a no-win situation. Yeah, just a quick observation. I heard Patricia Pappernow, who's a step family researcher that I respect a lot. I heard her say once, in all families across cultures and space and time, here is a truism about blended families. Usually, step parents want higher boundaries to be set with children. They want more rules and they want better behavior from kids, more regulation of children's behavior. And biological parents want more mercy and kindness and compassion for how hard it is for their kids to have that good behavior. And that creates this natural conflict between step parent and biological parent. That's what we've got in this question. It is a tough, tough situation.
It is, but I do want to say that a step-parent has some objectivity sometimes that a biological parent doesn't have, because they're more enmeshed in that relationship. Mm-hmm. And so for my husband and I, Randy saw some things in one of my girls that I really wasn't even seeing. He saw that this behavior was outside of what he would term normal. And he came to me in a very loving position, though, Ron. I think this is how it has to happen. You know, I love you. I love your girls. I want what's best for them. Mm-hmm. Can I share something with you that I'm seeing? And so it's humility. Yep. It's showing love.
Soft.
If that is on the front end, then the biological parent can hear it.
That is so important. Lead with your heart.
Right.
Here's what I'm hoping to get out of this conversation for your kids. Not, your kids are horrible. I don't know what you've been doing for the last 13 years.
Right.
Now you criticize the children and your spouse as their parent. So it just starts off wrong. So start well. Mm-hmm. Show your heart. Invite the other person's willingness. But let me cut to the chase. So even if he led with that, still it's hard to hear.
Oh, you're going to get defensive. I mean, it's like I did get defensive, and Randy had to back up a little bit, and we had to revisit that conversation again later.
So gave you a little space.
Right.
Right. And so what did you have to do internally to get where your ears were open?
I had to process it myself and then begin to consider, could he be right? Did I hear some of this from a teacher? Yes. So now I'm hearing it from more than one source.
Gotcha.
And maybe I need to open my eyes and ears to this.
Yep. I think that's the right strategy. Here's the good news and the bad news to the person who asked this question. In my experience, a lot of biological parents did just like you. They may be a little defensive on the front, but they can get there and they're open, they're listening.
Right.
And now you have an opportunity to work together and be a team and try to figure out how you guys respond going forward. Some biological parents, it's really rooted in a relationship pattern with their child, and they're so afraid of changing it for a variety of reasons. Losing their kid to the other home, to my child's already angry with me, I can't afford one more thing that comes between us. There's just a host of reasons why they're stuck. And they will agree with you sometimes, this needs to change, and then they'll not follow through. Those are really frustrating step-parent situations, extremely frustrating. When that happens, I think you try to find another trusted voice that the biological parent will hear. Maybe it's their uncle. Maybe it's their brother. Maybe it's their dad. Maybe it's Pastor Joe. Maybe it's marriage mentor couple that he just has a great admiration for. Somebody outside of you, the little two of you, that perhaps can speak into the situation. And again, with gentleness and softness, step in, try to hear that biological parent's pain and fear, acknowledge that, validate that. Now, what do we do with that? Because right now you're still being held hostage by this fear that you have. That's not serving your child very well. So what are we going to do about this? That sort of thing hopefully moves them to a place where they're going, okay, we got to change it.
Right. But when you think about kind of high level, you do want to err on the side of the marriage. So if you see that this conflict and your spouse can't get to the same place that you are seeing at some point, you do have to pull back. And just like you say, look for another trusted voice, because you cannot let it divide your marriage. And that can happen.
Okay, we got two more questions. This one says, I'm currently struggling in my role as a stepdad and husband in a family with an on and off present narcissistic father who was and is abusive toward my wife. So in other words, when he was married to this woman, this is the biological dad, he was abusive and manipulative. He also belittles my stepchildren, and I suspect discourages them from loving both me and their mother. I was raised with the idea of the husband being the protector and leader of the family unit, and I've had difficulty being told that I'm not allowed to speak out against the lies and the actions of their biological dad. What do I do? First of all, I love the protector in you. I love that you are wanting to do right by these kids and you're wanting to improve the situation and stand up for what's right. It is wise of you to recognize when you have a voice and where you have a voice, to what degree you have a voice. And those are things I don't really know. My guess is your wife wants you to have a voice. She needs that protector. I'm also thinking she needs to learn how to find her own voice with her former husband.
Right.
Who has been, narcissistic, controlling, unpredictable, unreliable for the kids and so on. So there's certainly that. Let me just say this. If I said, I want you to go into your neighbor's house, the people you don't know very well, and I want you to just start telling their kids what to do. Yeah. Okay, that's not going to fly. You don't have a voice there. Right. So even though you feel like, but I've been told I'm the protector of my neighborhood. Well, okay, good general principle and rule, but you can't actually do it with neighbors you don't know. They don't trust you. You don't have a voice there. So you have to take this into consideration. So work with your wife, work behind the scenes, have lots of conversations about this. Try to empower her even as she's trying to help her own children. Maybe there's somebody else who does have a voice. So you as protector can try to get things moving in the right direction, not without necessarily being the one who's spearheading or, the one who's commanding the attention of everyone. That may backfire on you. But you can still be working behind the scenes to try to make this happen. I would discourage you from trying to confront their biological dad.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially if you're right about the label, narcissistic, is not going to work.
No, it's not.
He's just going to feel even more empowered. Yep, see, that's why I need to be in charge and not you. You just make him more of what he is. That's probably a losing game. That's not where your influence is going to be best served, with your wife and indirectly with the children in your home.
I agree. It's just a hard situation.
It is.
And again, in time, some of that could get better. Some of that could change. All right, let's move on. I think we just have one more.
Right.
I'll be starting a small group on blended families. I'd like to know where to get information on the Smart Step Family, where to get participant materials, and leaders information.
Well, the good news is go to FamilyLife and click our shop. You can get all of our resources there. And there's actually a way that you can watch the Smart Step Family video series, 8 sessions, for free.
Yes.
And we will put this in the show notes so you can link to it. But Gayla, I got to say, we got to tell people we have more than one video curriculum. It used to be the Smart Step Family was all there was. Now we have Blended and Blessed, previous years. All of those are accessible.
Right.
You have a study that goes along with your book. I've got another book, The Smart Step Family Marriage, that has a 13-week study guide that goes along with it. I added it up the other day. We have 10 curriculum that churches can get their hands on, couples can use. Online courses now are part of that 10. Well Blended is a course you can do from home on your own time right over through our webpage at FamilyLife. So come and seek and find and email us, blended@familylife.com if you can't find what you're looking for. We'll be happy to help you find what you need and get you going.
Right. I mean, that's what we're all about, is trying to equip step families and offer them resources that can be helpful.
Gayla, thanks for being with me today.
It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to my conversation with Gayla Grace. I'm Ron Deal, and this is a special edition of Family Life Blended. If you have a topic or question you'd like us to address on a future podcast, make sure you submit it to us. Email it, blendedquestions@familylife.com. That's the address, blendedquestions@familylife.com. Or you can call the number that you find in the show notes and leave us a voice message, and we might just play that on a future episode. Again, just look in the show notes to learn how you could submit your topic or question. We love getting reviews from people. Would you write one? Recently, Apple user RDY1 said, "I love this podcast. While not all blended families look alike, something out of each episode connects with me as I navigate being a step-parent. It also gives me insight into others in my life who also have a blended family. Thanks, Ron. Your ministry is a blessing." Well, thank you to you for taking the time to write that and share that with us. I sure hope other listeners will do the same. If you'd like more information about this podcast, you can check it out on the Family Life Blended podcast page at familylife.com/blended podcast. And while you're there, make sure you check out everything Family Life has for your marriage and family. Our division, Family Life Blended, has the world's largest collection of articles, videos, resources, online courses, and books for blended families. And we just finished our first Preparing to Blend virtual training for leaders and pastors who do premarital counseling. If you missed it, email us at blended@familylife.com and ask to be notified about our next virtual training. You can do that from anywhere in the world. Again, email blended@familylife.com to be notified. Speaking of online, have you seen our new online courses for couples and leaders? These are on-demand courses that you can do from home when it's convenient for you. We have a course for couples called Well Blended and a certificate course in blended family ministry for leaders. Check them out. The show notes will tell you how. Okay, I told you earlier about Blended and Blessed, but I really want to make sure you save the dates, so get it on your calendar. Saturday, April 2nd, 2022, live in Houston, live streamed around the world. Learn all about this one-of-a-kind marriage seminar for blended family couples at blendedandblessed.com. Next time, we're going to hear from sex therapist Michael Seitzma about what to do when one of you desires sex more than the other.
Well, if her desire is lower, his way of serving her is creating an environment that she would want to step into.
That's Michael Seitzma next time on Family Life Blended. I'm Ron Deal. Thanks for listening, and thanks to our monthly donors who make this podcast possible. If you'd like to help or just say thank you with a donation, look in the show notes for a link. Every dollar counts, and we greatly appreciate it. Our producer is Marcus Holt, mastering engineer Jarrett Roski, project coordinator Ann Caro, and theme music composed and performed by Braden Deal. Family Life Blended is part of the Family Life Podcast Network, helping you pursue the relationships that matter most.